Hello, beloved ones. Thank you for joining me for part 2 of how to break your chains of fear. Now, I use the image of chains because they are very significant. And when you think of being bound by chains, there's a heaviness to that. And when you feel bound, you feel as though you are being held back or repressed, or you are in bondage. And when you are feeling as though you're held in place like that, it's easy to start turning inward or spiraling down, becoming more and more obsessed with self, right? With your problems, with your issues. And that is how fear tends to feed itself. So in the last video, when I focused on the fear of not getting what you want, can't have this relationship, not going to get this relationship, not going to be with this person, and then on, and every time that you participate in that fear, you bind yourself to the fear itself. And when you bind yourself to that fear, the fear starts to feed off of you, and you start to feed off of the fear. And when that happens, that's what creates that feeling of being stuck, right? When you tell your friend, oh, I feel stuck in my life, right? That is because somehow, some way you have bound yourself to a particular fear, right? So if there are the two fears, not getting what you want and losing what you have, then you take each one, and there are particular or specific fears that fall under those two categories, right? And each fear, depending on how much of the chain, thought, visceral reaction, response, feeling the fear, and then reacting to that feeling, that visceral response. And if you react enough in the same way, you create a behavior or habit, right? So if you forge those chains for a particular fear, the more time you spend forging that chain, the more bound to it you become. And then you start to feel as though you have to feed it. In a way, it's like feeling responsible for something you've created, right? That you have to keep feeding it. And oftentimes, most of the time, you don't even know why you keep feeding it. You can see with your rational mind that this is not healthy. This is not a good thing or a good habit. Oftentimes people just see the habit. They don't know to go back and discover each link in the chain. But they know, you know that the habit is not serving you, or the behavior, the belief is not serving you. But how to change it? Why do you continue to do it? Because at some point you poured a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort into forging this particular chain of fear. And so let me say first of all that breaking these chains, depending on how long you took to forge it, please, beloved ones, please don't believe that you can break it overnight or a few weeks. Now, you might want to start the practice that I'm going to give to you with small things. Maybe it's a chain that you're just starting to forge and it's brand new and you haven't put much time and effort into it, but you can already see that you are putting time and effort into it. You are slowly becoming bound to this particular fear. If it's new, then you might want to start experimenting with this technique with that, because it will be easier to break it, easier to interrupt it, because you have not invested so much of yourself already into it. Right? You don't identify yourself with the chain yet. Maybe it's just something, a new habit or something you just started. So that might be a very good place for you to start with this technique. If you tend towards impatience or you tend to want to see results right away. But for those of you that want to use this for a chain that you are highly invested in, that has bound you for much of your life, then recognize that breaking that chain is still not as hard as you believe it to be, but it will take more time. Let's say it's a chain that you've forged and kept strong and solid for decades. So if you think about a fear that has been a part of your life for 2 or 3 decades, 20 or 30 years, would a year to break that chain be too much or too long? Or even 2 years in compared to 30? Right? So if you look at it that way, that will help you to be more patient with the process. It's not easy in the respect that these chains that you forge and you put all that time and effort into creating and maintaining and practicing, they literally start to feel a part of you, as if they are a part of you. And I want you to be careful of that. Because when you identify with your fears in that manner, it is much harder to find the courage to take action to break the chain, because you think, well, who will I be without this particular chain of fear? Well, you'll be you. You can't ever be anything else. You'll always just be you. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But when you break these chains of fears, they do not alter your essence, your personality. It's not as if your humor will change or your basic outlook on life, meaning that if you find yourself to be a positive person, that will not change this, right? What it will do is set you free to be more positive, right? To be more of yourself. your beautiful, wonderful, unique personality, there'll be more room for that, because there's all the room in your life, your consciousness, your thoughts, your awareness, that this one chain of fear takes up, inhabits. When that is broken, more of you is released. Whatever was bound with that chain gets released. So don't think in terms of who will I be if I don't have this habit or I don't have this particular fear anymore. You'll always be yourself. But think in terms of how much more of myself will I be? What parts of my wonderful self will all of a sudden be made available to me once I break this chain? So for the purposes of this particular two-part video, we are going to focus solely on the first link, the thought. Right? Because the two fears, not getting what you want and losing what you have, are unique to humans. Right? Animals don't have that fear. They don't think ahead about losing what they have or not getting what they need. Right? They don't think that way. You do. You have that ability, but you don't have to. Right? So the other links are very important. And I have certainly addressed them in other videos, and I will probably address them in other videos to come. But today we're going to focus primarily on that first link, and that is the thought. As soon as you identify that you have forged a particular chain of fear, your first focus needs to be on tracking down the original thought. And that may take a little while, because the thought may be running most often in the unconscious. You may not even have allowed yourself to be aware of the original thought that forged this chain and keeps it strong. You might use all kinds of other thoughts about the other links. Maybe you think a lot about the habit, which is the very end of the chain, but you don't think about the original thought that started the whole thing. Right? So you want to understand that along the way in forging this chain, you have created lots of cover-ups along the way so that each link can stay hidden. And when it's a hidden chain of fear, it's much more difficult to break. But if you find yourself at the other end with a behavior, a belief, a habit, a pattern that has become obvious to you, bring it all the way back to the beginning and track down the original thought that's still going in the background, somewhere in your mind, somewhere in your consciousness. That thought exists. You may have to write about it, write around the thought until you work your way into the center and discover the thought. You may need to meditate to create a space. Imagine that you are in this wonderful space. Imagine it's your mind, And somewhere in this space is that original thought that started this chain of fear. That is the first link in the chain of fear. And you're just going to sit in this thought sphere until you feel, until you see, until you know what that thought is. Most likely, if it's an old chain, it's going to be a very old thought, or one that you started when you were very young. So write around it until you can write into it. Right? Just keep writing. Different thoughts that might be it. Write about those thoughts. Maybe you can write about the other links of the chain and what you think about them, how you feel about them. But always keep coming back to what's the original thought. Meditate. Allow the thought to just show up. You don't have to go searching for it or forcing it or pretending like, oh, that's got to be it. Stay curious. Stay open. Let the thought come to you, but you must put yourself in a place to receive the thought and be patient. It might not work to sit down with me and say, Mother, tell me what the thought is right now. Ask me to support and assist your process. Let's sit together and let the thought bubble up to the surface. It could take weeks, but that's going to be your focus. Go back to the original thought. And when you find that thought, hold it like a precious thing in your hands. Find deep compassion for that thought, for having it, for creating it, for using that thought to forge the links of these chains, to all the time and effort and energy you put into that thought to grow the whole chain that ended up binding you in place, binding you in fear. Hold that thought with deep compassion. And then you imagine that you're holding that thought in your hands, and you just fill your hands with light. Fill your hands with light, as if the thought just bursts into white light. And then you take your hands and that thought and you place it in your heart, physically. That's what I'm asking you to do. Once it's filled with white light, you put it in your heart. And you just let that thought sit in your heart, and you love that thought. You put all your love into that thought, all the compassion and understanding and kindness, and most importantly, forgiveness. And as you hold that thought in your heart, you say with eyes closed, deep within your heart, I love you and I forgive you. I love you, please forgive me. And you do this ritual every day, and you will start to see this chain will begin to break. And all of the feelings and behaviors and reactions and habits will start to unravel from there. Because your heart, your soul will guide you to not participate in those behaviors, those beliefs, those patterns. Because when you love that original thought, that original decision to start forging that chain, when you love that, you pour love into that. When you forgive that, you set yourself free. Give it a try, beloved ones. You have only to gain. And what you have to lose is the chains that bind you, that keep you hidden from yourself, that keep you in pain. And I'll be there with you every step of the way. Always, always. Namaste. Hi, it's Danielle, creator and founder of Beloved Publications, your home of Mother Mary's teachings as they're channeled through me. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment. I would love to hear from you. If you're interested in more of Mother's teachings, please visit our website, www.belovedpublications.com. And there you'll find lots of great ways of connecting with Mother. And if you want to join our community, you get an awesome free mini course on preparing for and connecting with your spirit guides. You will love it. So I hope to see you there soon. Thanks so much.